Federalist, though, is standing by from Institute for Reforming Government, but also has a great piece at the Federalist, co-authored with Matt Batesel. And that is an investigation into certain elements of Susan Crawford's background the media hasn't touched. I mean, you're doing, again, Jake, you're not a reporter by name, but you're doing the job other reporters ought to be doing. Thanks for joining me on the Middleton Ford Hotline.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
What have we found out? This relates to education, and let's just stipulate, there will be education cases coming before the Supreme Court depending on how the April 1st election goes. Challenging whether or not school choice should continue, potentially questioning, at least we've seen this nationally because the NEA wants it, whether homeschooling should continue. And you have found a troubling connection between Susan Crawford and the left regarding these issues.
Right, and I think you're framing it well, Vicki, that there's kind of the immediate concern. So what Matt Batesel and so Matt Batesel's good friend, I think many of your listeners know his work at American Majority, and we started to look at a book. It's called Homeschooling: The History and Philosophy of a Controversial Practice. That's literally the title of the book. And when you look at, to call it a controversial practice, right? In the 80s, I think in 85. There were 966 students in Wisconsin who were homeschooled. In the 23-24 academic year, it was over 30,000. So not a controversial practice. Those of us and I know you're in this camp, Vicki, right? We support an all of the above approach to education, whether it's private school, public school, virtual school, homeschool, right? Let the parents decide. This is a really basic principle. And so it's pretty troubling when you look at this book. It's an academic book. It's very, it's well researched, but the conclusions are really absurd. So, for example, the authors.
Well, we should say who the author is first.
One of the authors is Susan Crawford's husband, and the authors talk about IQ tests for parents, and the requirement for certifications, which completely undermines the whole purpose of homeschooling, right? The purpose of homeschooling is most parents are going to have an education themselves, and they are certainly able and qualified in the sense of being able to know what's best for their kids when it comes to education. And there's so many tools out there today. So and I should be clear. So Matt homeschools with his wife. I homeschool with my wife, and when I say that, it's like 95-5, right? My wife is amazing, and she does like probably 95% of the work when it comes to homeschooling, and she knows what's best for our kids. And then when our kids get to high school, they go to a Christian high school, and so there's all variations of homeschooling. And to have an IQ test for parents is absurd, right? And the certifications, because you look at this, public school settings. When you compare kind of the performance of homeschool kids to traditional public school kids, homeschool kids often outperform them. And again, I'm not knocking traditional education. For some kids, that's going to be the right choice. But it gets this fundamental principle of kind of the point of the book that parents shouldn't be trusted to make those decisions for their kids. And then there's other things that are really troubling. So, for example, he talks about the harm done to girls. That's, it's pretty hard to offend me. Like, I have a daughter, my wife and I give her tons of opportunities. Again, when she gets to high school, she can go to a traditional private high school. And to say, like, because you homeschool, you're harming your daughter, there's a lot of harm going on in public schools. When you look at Title IX and in some of these public schools where girls are being forced to change in locker rooms, being forced to compete against biological boys, I think there's a lot of harm going on there.
Let me also tease out something else, and I don't want to miss this. The book, Susan Crawford's husband's making the argument. to use novel interpretations of the law to present to activist judges to upend and essentially stop the spread of homeschooling. That's the thing that really concerns me, is that his wife wants to be on the Supreme Court. This, by the way, this book was written in 2019. This is not ancient history. This is just before COVID. And his wife has the same view that she should look upon her role as a judge in a way to create outcome-based judiciary. That's what he's talking about. Use novel legal theories to present to sympathetic judges who would use their philosophy of putting their values before the law to impose this on states or on districts or on individual students. That's what bothers me even more than IQ tests for parents, is this guy's got a judge for a wife.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Vicki. And so basically the argument would be, and I would emphasize kind of the novel character of this argument, is that, that the states or individuals should be empowered to essentially sue, and presumably it might involve litigation against the state to require testing of parents that may not be meeting certain standards. And so it is, we talk about lawfare all the time. This would be lawfare, right? This would be using litigation tools to kind of enforce or create an outcome undermining the ability of parents to continue homeschooling their kids. And you're right, that the kind of the nexus to Judge Crawford is concerning. Does she agree with these novel kind of litigation tactics? And if she does, I would take a step further, Vicki. Where does it end, right? Or what sort of tools or tactics are they going to use with respect to school choice? I mean, remember when school choice, this, Vicki, when school choice was passed during the Thompson administration, there was significant litigation, and those were 4-3 decisions that upheld the school choice law. And so we just had a challenge last year that was dismissed. What happens when there's a challenge to the school choice framework? If there's a challenge to the virtual school framework? I mean, any of the education options that, again, we should all support. Give parents the right, the choice to make the decision that's best for their kids when it comes to education. And so when you look at kind of this sort of issue, whether it's homeschooling or school choice, you have to wonder, will she be objective if there are legal challenges that are put in front of her?
Indeed. And by the way, the Wisconsin Supreme Court did not take up the school choice lawsuit. They just chose not to reject it on its merits, but just said they wouldn't take it under original jurisdiction. That's the
Correct.
status of the left-wing Wisconsin Supreme Court. Susan Crawford gets on that court. This case could potentially be refiled as is. This case could be tweaked and refiled. This case could use these novel legal theories, because the exact same legal theories on homeschool are theories that would be applied as well to school choice. We should have public schools certification of all of the teachers who teach in school choice schools, in school voucher schools. We should require IQ testing for the teachers who teach in these private school choice schools. By the way, I would like, if IQ testing is a thing, let's IQ test all the public school teachers. All of them.
Right.
Let's IQ test every single one of them. Let's IQ test all the administrators. Let's do the whole shebang. Let's IQ test legislators. Let's IQ test justices on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Let's just run the whole IQ idea on everything that is related to taxpayer-funded government. Everything. What do you say? Who's with me on that? But that's what they're trying to impose on the private sector, exempting themselves. But these cases will come before her court. Has anyone asked her, what do you think about your husband's arguments in a very recent book, essentially saying we need to use lawfare to shut down homeschooling, which is also lawfare to anything the NEA wants. Incidentally, Jake, the NEA says use lawfare to shut down school choice, to shut down homeschooling. This has been their position for as long as I can remember. Has anyone asked her the question, do you support these ideas?
I don't believe anybody has. I mean, it certainly didn't come up in the debate. And I think you're highlighting an important point here, is that it's really incumbent upon Talk Radio, you and Jay and all the other great hosts that we have in Southeast Wisconsin, South Central Wisconsin, even Central Wisconsin. I was on this morning with Meg Ellison. I mean, you guys are playing a critical role because the media is not asking these questions. And obviously, if you're a center-right group and you ask that question, you're just going to, be dismissed. And so we need to continue to, over these last few weeks, and look, we're objectively looking at this. We're not taking a political position, but the reality is something like this with a book raises all sorts of questions. And you're absolutely correct, Vicki, that while this was in the context of homeschooling, absolutely these arguments could be applied to, frankly, not only school choice, but virtual schools. Open enrollment. I mean, I honestly, because I don't know what the answer is. And to your point, she hasn't been asked. And so you have to just prepare for lawfare that could include attacks to anything but traditional public education.
Yes.
That's what most families are going to use, and that's great if that's their choice. But I just don't understand from a policy standpoint why the left, I know why they do it. It's sad that they just refuse to just give parents the option that works best for their family.
Virtual schools as well, not the public virtual schools, but private virtual schools have popped up all over the place in support
Absolutely.
System for parents to homeschool. That's why it went from 900 in Wisconsin to 30,000 in Wisconsin, because a whole bunch of parents realized how terrible the schools were when they looked over their kid's shoulder during, distanced learning during COVID. And so there are tons of virtual education organizations that are either standalone schools. My friend runs one that are either standalone traditional schools that your kid can just log in and take classes, or they operate as homeschool support networks. So you can homeschool your kid in history, homeschool your kid in English, but if you want your child to have, advanced math in calculus or in analytical geometry or something like that, you can use these services because they are now they've closed the gap on education in high school, where a lot of parents say, okay, well, this is where I part ways with my ability to, master the mathematics to teach my kids. So I need an extra support system. That's where these things have closed the gaps. His book is a roadmap for how to dismantle this innovation that has come online for education, that has allowed so many people escape hatches from this problem and have provided a cost-effective way for parents who didn't think they could afford it to homeschool their kids.
Right. And I just want to go back to your previous point, Vicki, about school choice and, which predominantly is or many are religious-based. Those DPI statistics that I cited earlier, the 30,000 kids at homeschool, there's almost 130,000 kids that take advantage of a private school setting, and some of those would be school choice, but not all of them, right? But you're absolutely right. And, so I'm Lutheran, and I know I have a lot of friends that teach in the Lutheran school system, right? They have a very vigorous education, at least for the Wells. They go to MLC in New Ulm, right? They have a 4-year degree. Many go get master's degrees. They are very qualified, but to say that they're going to have to go through this rigorous testing is frankly absurd. But again, it begs the question: is that what Judge Crawford believes? And Vicki, if we have time, I just want to bring up one other thing. So at IRG, we've been putting out primers every week. We put out, I think, a really important primer this week relating to religious liberty. So we've been talking about homeschooling and religious kind of based education. Like we need to even take it to the next level, like the 30,000 foot kind of level of just religious liberty generally. And I don't think people talk enough about how important these cases are. There's a case out of the Superior Diocese it was a 4-3 decision from the current progressive majority that basically, and I'm simplifying this, but basically that this Catholic charity has to pay DWD taxes, and they had previously been exempt. And this case is now on appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Obviously, there's a huge financial element. Exempt entities like nonprofits, churches, if they have to start paying this tax, it would be financially kind of crippling. But I think, frankly, the even bigger issue is, in order to make that decision, the court basically went through and determined, this charity from the Superior Diocese, they help the poor, they have other ministries, but it's not really churchy enough. And I'm using air quotes when I say churchy, but that's kind of the point, right? We cannot have courts going through an analysis to determine whether or not a ministry or a charitable arm of a religious organization is churchy enough. There should be a very basic threshold, right? If you've been designated as a 501c3 by the IRS as a nonprofit entity, that should be good enough. And to go through this analysis that the majority, the progressive majority on the state Supreme Court wants to go through, is not only troubling, like I said, from a financial standpoint. I mean, think about kind of the landmine that the court would have to go through to determine whether or not entities are, have enough of a religious purpose. That's
right. So,
really
by the way, religion is one of the main reasons cited by people who choose to homeschool their kids. Religion is one of the reasons a lot of people cite to put their kids in public schools. And so suddenly, is this education environment sufficiently churchy enough so that we can allow you your religious liberty, right? We've seen those arguments. The left has been making the arguments that, your photography business isn't really a church. And so we think we're going to have to order you to take pictures of trans weddings, right? Or your cake business isn't quite, it's not really religious. And so we're going to order you to violate your conscience, and your First Amendment rights to religious liberty just because we say so. And these arguments are just, they are the backbone of the left's thinking. So expect them to be presented. Expect the Karen majority, the left-wing menopausal Karen majority on the court, to be very amenable to these arguments. If we give them another opportunity to maintain that left-wing feminist majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, Katie, bar the door on the kinds of cases that will come forward. And homeschooling is a case. There are already multiple homeschooling cases across the country. These are funded by left-wing interest groups. The NEA desperately wants to shut it down. We are going to see the school choice case come back in some form or another. And no one's asking this candidate. Nobody even bothered to dig into this, except you. So folks should ask Susan Crawford, what do you think about homeschooling? What do you think about IQ tests for parents? See what she says.
I hope somebody asks her that. We're going to continue to put this message out. What one thing that
unfortunately, I'm out of time, Jake. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm out of time.
No worries. Let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you very much, Jake Curtis from IRG, Institute for Reforming Government. You can see his latest at thefederalist.com, co-authored with Matt Batesall from American Majority. We'll take a quick break.